Hey everybody. Nice to see you again. Welcome to another video of stories of mythological stories. And as I said in my last video, I'm taking requests. And I got some interesting requests. One person was interested in stories of the dead. That's not what I'm doing today. However, I'll look into that. In the meantime, for the person that asked me that, and anybody else that's interested in stories of the dead, I did make a previous video called Underworlds. So if you look for that, it'll give you some idea of the idea of the underworld, where where we go when we die, in different cultures, different mythologies. And in the meantime, later on, I'll think of another video where I'll talk about the dead more. Uh, Today, I want to talk about something. I want to tell three stories where the only thread I could think of that runs through them is something called the passionate heart, where we talk about, the heart as a place of great pain and passion. And, we often talk about, love as being of the heart, and the pain that love can bring, as well as the loss of a loved one, as being associated with the heart. And the heart can do all kinds of, and it when we feel pain in inside of us, it tends to be associated with the heart. It's just a figure of speech. Two stories have to do with heartbreak, and actually, one story has to do with heartbreak. Another story has to do with kind of like the discovery of love, and one story has to do with an actual physical heart. And The first story I want to tell is actually from ancient Egypt. It's uh, it's actually from this book that I read many years ago. It's actually a young person's book. I recently repurchased it because my original copy I lent to somebody, and never lend your favorite books out. You may never see them again. I never saw it again. So I actually rebought it because I wanted to read the story I'm going to tell you today, because I like this author's version of the story. I've read different versions of it, but I like his because the way he words things. And basically, I'm going to have the stories and the books below in the description. This is actually a young person's book. Maybe not exactly a children's book, but it is for younger readers, and there's nothing wrong with that, because they're told in a fun way, and it's actually simply called Tales of Ancient Egypt by Roger Lancelyn Green. And He's known as a writer of different collections of myths. For example, in this book, he tells some of the important myths of Egypt. And another one, he talks about the Norse myths. I didn't read that one, but this one I read a long time ago. And what happens is that it tells of the god Ra, who is the god of the sun. And, the Egyptians talk about, great gods that they worshipped. And there was a time where these gods were human-like, in that they had a human form, that where they became pharaoh of all of Egypt, which is why the pharaoh was seen as sort of a living god, because he was seen as sort of an embodiment of the sun on earth to rule Egypt, because at one time the gods actually were pharaohs of Egypt. So there was a time where Ra was not only the sun god, but he was the ruler of Egypt. He was the pharaoh of Egypt. But what happens is that when he grew really old, his own people rebelled against him. They were plotting against him, and he finds this out, and he gets so mad. They say he called forth his eye. And what does that mean, calling forth your eye? Basically, his eye was kind of his protector. It was actually the goddess Sehkmet, which is the goddess of war. Here she represents a lioness. You could see the lioness face and the sun disk on her head, and she's standing on top of a beetle, a dung beetle. This beetle is sometimes called Kepra, because what happens is that the sun is seen in parts of the day in the morning as Kepra, the same way as the dung beetle rolls the ball of dung in front of him. Ra, or as he's known in the morning, Kepra, rolls the sun before him in the sky as it rises. Otherwise, he's pictured as a falcon-headed god riding a boat called a bark. And it's funny, even though the Nile is on earth, it's also seen as traveling in heaven. And so he rides the Nile of the heavens. And also the heavens is pictured as the goddess Nut, or Nuit. You know, he's traveling her body over the sky. Anyway, I'm getting away from the main story. What happens is that he calls forth his eye, or Sehkmet, and as in the form of a lioness, he orders her to kill the humans. So she goes around killing men left and right. But the problem is that he doesn't want her to kill literally everybody, because there's going to be nobody left to worship him. And not everybody was a conspirator against him. So, but she was so enraged by the people that would dare hurt her, the god she worked for and worshipped, that she vowed to protect. He couldn't control her. So what he did was he came up with a plan. He ordered his people to gather thousands of jugs of beer and dye it red so that it looks like blood. And then they poured these thousands of jugs out on the sands. And Sehkmet comes out of the mountains and sees her reflection in this. She thought it was blood. And she sees her reflection and smiles, and she starts lapping up all of this beer. And she drinks so much of it, she gets drunk, and she totally forgets what she's there for, to kill people. And she forgets. So then Ra comes down and says to her, "Oh, you're drunk now. Okay, now I have a little more control over you." And he says to you, "But I'll never forget the favor you did for me. And from now on, you will be called Hathor. And once a year, we're going to have a big celebration where men will come to your temple and drink tons of beer and get loaded. And so you'll be known as a goddess that will bring a new pleasure and a new pain." Now, Hathor is not only is she the goddess of drinking beer and getting hammered. She's also the goddess of beauty and love. She's seen as sort of an Aphrodite figure to the Egyptians. But it's funny the way this author worships it. I mean, not worship, describes it. I don't know if he's right, if he's exactly right in his interpretation of Ra saying that you as Hathor. So there seems to be this similarity between the goddess Sehkmet and the goddess of love and beauty named Hathor. But I like the way he words it, that you will be the goddess of a new pleasure and a new pain. You know, the pleasure is the drinking of beer. The pain is love. And you would think, isn't love a pleasure too? Well, love could be very, very painful. Of course, especially if it's unrequited love. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. And and of course, love and marriage is takes a lot of work, and doesn't always end well. So he says, so when he made Sehkmet drunk and he was able to sort of let her calm down and take on the duties of Hathor, he said to her, you bring a new pleasure and a new pain. I like the way he worded that. I never forgot that. Other versions of the story aren't worded like that. My second story is going to be of an actual physical heart. What happens is that in Mexico, the Aztecs they worshipped a god called Quetzalcoatl, which means feathered serpent or plumed serpent, plumed snake, feathered snake. Basically, Quetzal, it was a type of bird that had this beautiful plumage and a very long tail with these remarkable feathers. The most prized possession of a ruler is his headdress made of Quetzal feathers. I think it was prized even more than gold. And what happened is that Quetzalcoatl, who's in the Maya referred to as Kukulkan, which also means feathered serpent, I believe. And so Quetzal is the bird, and Coatl, Coatl, means snake. So Quetzalcoatl, bird snake, basically, or feathered snake. And what happens is that it's believed that just like in ancient Egypt, the early rulers of not so much the Aztecs, but their predecessors, the Toltecs, had their godlike rulers. So sometimes Quetzalcoatl is seen as a godlike ruler of the Toltecs. And what happens is that he was actually a sort of peace-loving kind of god. Usually, when you think of Aztec gods, you think of these bloodthirsty gods like the sun god who wanted human sacrifice and demanded it. Quetzalcoatl refused to receive human sacrifice. He believed if you want to sacrifice, draw your own blood, using cactus needles from your ear, from your tongue, parts of your body, and draw blood, and that'll be your sacrifice to me. But don't hurt another human being. Don't kill them. What happens is that it was a time of peace and plenty during Quetzalcoatl's rule. And what happens is that there was another god who named Tezcatlipoca, and his name means smoking mirror. And he didn't like Quetzalcoatl. He didn't like his peace-loving ways and his success, and he wanted to bring down his downfall. So what he did was he showed up as sort of an evil magician, a sorcerer, and he demanded to see Quetzalcoatl. And he said, he's sick, and I have medicine for him. And it turns out the so-called medicine was pulque. Now, if you know anything about pulque, it's basically the alcohol from the agave plants that the Aztecs used to drink. And I don't know if it was just the Aztecs. It may have been the Nahuatl-speaking people of Mexico, which were... Nahuatl was the language that, or Nahua, as it's sometimes called, the Aztecs spoke, as well as other tribes that were associated with the Aztecs. Mayan was the language spoken by the Maya, but the Aztecs and other various tribes, and I think the Toltecs too, spoke Nahuatl. Pulque is actually similar to tequila. I believe tequila is also distilled from the agave plants, but I think the ancient Mexicans drank maybe a more potent raw form of it called pulque. So what happens is that he proceeded in getting Quetzalcoatl drunk on pulque. And the thing is, Quetzalcoatl led a kind of holy life. He didn't indulge in debauchery or anything. He lived a very upright, private life. And he got so drunk, and he was having so much fun drinking this pulque, he invited his sister to join him. So she got drunk with him. And the sad thing is that the two of them got so drunk, they totally lost their sense of propriety. And, well, they slept with each other. They committed incest. And when they came to and they had their hangover, they realized what they had done, and they were both so ashamed. And Quetzalcoatl decided to end his reign. And he did it in a spectacular fashion. He went off away from the city, and he immolated himself. He set himself on fire, and as a type of penance. But he wouldn't leave his people completely without any reminder of who he was and what he had given them. What he did was, from his ashes, these birds rose up and carried his heart, which was still intact, away, and they took it all the way to the sky, and it became Venus, or also known as the morning star and the evening star. And so Quetzalcoatl is the god of the morning star, otherwise known as Venus. And I read a few books on Mexican mythology, but I bought this book. I reread that story recently, but I got this book mainly because of this amazing illustration, which I don't know if you could see here. Here's Quetzalcoatl in his jade serpent mask, and here's the feathers. I don't know if you can see it that well. Here's the feathers up here, and the feathers, the Quetzal feathers. And here's the fire that he immolated himself in. And here's his ashes in the form of birds carrying his heart all the way to the sky to become the morning star. And so that's an amazing illustration. The third story I referred to briefly in my early video on what to read in the mythology of the Incas. I recommended this book, and I referred to a story very briefly called The Boy Who Rose into the Sky. But then I reread that same story in this book that I just showed you. This wonderful little book, which is very beautifully illustrated, is called Warriors, Gods, and Spirits from Central and South American Mythology. And it's by Douglas Giffords, so basically, this third story is about love and loss. There was this old couple. Well, they weren't that old, but they had this young son. And what happens is that they were potato farmers, and they planted potatoes. And recently, every night, their potatoes would go missing. And they thought it was just thieves. So what they did was they sent their son to go out there. And they said, what good is having a young, strong son if he doesn't keep watch over our potatoes? Now, you got to stay alert all night, because the thieves come in the night. And the son stayed with his eyes open all night. But when dawn came, he just couldn't stand it anymore. He nodded off, and when he woke up, he wasn't out for long. When he woke up, the potatoes were missing, and he went back to his parents, and they said to him, "Okay, we'll forgive you this time." And then he stayed another night, and again, he drifted off a little bit, just for like a few moments. And when he woke up, the potatoes were gone again, and this time the parents beat him. And they said, okay, we're going to give you one last chance. And the third time, his eyes, in the wee hours of the morning, they were trembling, because he was trying to keep his eyelids wide open so he wouldn't fall asleep. And he sees something very strange. At first, he thought he was dreaming, but there were these incredibly beautiful young maidens digging up potatoes. And they were all wearing silver uniforms, silver clothing. And he realized that these were the Star Maidens. It's believed that the stars were these beautiful women that existed in the sky. They were the daughters of the sun and moon, and they made the stars. The stars were actually these women, and you could tell that they were Star Maidens because they wore these silver uniforms, because stars are usually associated with silver. And so he says, I'm gonna make one of them my wife. And so he runs out. They all run away, but he manages to grab hold of one of them. And she goes, let me go, don't leave me, don't keep me here entrapped on earth. I belong in the sky. And he says, no, I want you here. So what happens is that the parents are wondering what's keeping him. He's not coming back home. And the father's like, oh, he's probably chasing women out there, which in a way he kind of was. And the mother got worried, and there was a little hut in the field. She brought him some food, and the Star Maiden said to him, don't let your parents see me. And so he went out to meet his mother. He goes, Mom, I don't want you to come any further. Just give me the food. And then he got friendlier with the Star Maiden. And he tricked her into having her come to his parents' house so they would meet her. And at first she said no, but then he took her on a different path away from the house, but really he was leading her to his parents' house. Anyway, they meet her and they're astounded by the level of beauty and radiance this girl had. So they do get married. But like other stories of this kind, when a mortal man falls in love with some heavenly being, or some fairy of the woods, or some otherworldly creature, it usually doesn't end well. She eventually escapes one day while he's out on a business trip, and what happens is that she goes outside of the house, and she rises up into the sky and to join her sisters in in heaven. And what happens is that when he comes back, he's so upset. He goes walking around South America, all over South America, crying, and he comes across this very wise old condor. And the condor says, "Hey, dude, I've never seen anybody cry as much as you. Can you tell me what's upsetting you so much?" And he goes, "Oh, I was married to this beautiful Star Maiden, and she escaped and went back up to heaven." And he said to her, he goes, "Oh, you know what? I could actually fly there if you'd like, and I could take you with me. But there's a condition. You have to give me 2 llamas. One of them I'm going to eat here. The other one, you need to slit its throat, put it in a sack, and carry it with you over your back while we fly up to the heavens. And every time I say meat, you're going to take a slice of this llama meat and stick it in my beak. And all this time, you got to keep your eyes shut." So I'm wondering, this young man, how's he going to do this? He's got to keep his eyes shut. And whenever he hears the condor say meat, he has to search in the bag and strip off a piece of meat without opening his eyes, and then stick it in the beak of the condor. And the condor says, "If I say meat and you don't give me any, I'm going to throw you off my back." So the young man was so scared. He goes, "Okay." So for a while, this worked out. Every time the condor flew higher and higher, and every time he said meat, the young man was able to supply the meat without opening his eyes and without, slipping from his hands the meat. He was able to properly give it to the condor's beak. And the adventure to get into heaven took a freaking year, and they finally made it to heaven. And the condor says to him, "Okay, see that temple over there? All the Star Maidens are going to they're on their way to a ceremony. Now they're all going to look exactly like your wife, but don't worry. The woman that it walks by you and brushes up against you, that's your wife. Her you need to grab hold of, and then take her back to me, and we'll take her down to earth again." And what happens is that, just like the condor said, he goes to the temple, and all these beautiful women who look all the same went by him and hardly noticed him. But one of them, the last one, kind of brushed up against him. I mean, on Earth, she didn't seem to want to be married to him. She didn't want to be on Earth, and as soon as she had the chance, she left him. But she managed to like him enough to brush up against him, I guess, unless there's another reason why she did that. I don't know. And he grabbed hold of her, and she said, "I know I left you, but I was going to come back." I don't know if that was true. But anyway, besides the point. So they lived for a while in heaven, him and the Star Maiden. And for a while they seemed happy. But then she stopped visiting him and giving him food. And, she said to him one day, she goes, "Look, we can't be together anymore. I belong up here, you belong down there." Just like these stories tend to be. And so he, of course, went crying back to the condor. And the Condor said, "What's wrong?" She goes, "Oh, she kicked me out. Uh, she kicked me out of her house." And he's crying. And the Condor said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." So he strokes the young man with his feathers. And the young man said, "Can you take me back home so I could at least be with my parents?" And the Condor said, "Sure, but you got to give me 2 more llamas." And he goes, "Okay, I'll give you 2 more llamas. I'll give you as many llamas as you want once we're back down on Earth." And again, another whole year goes by the time they fly down to the Earth. I don't know how the two of them survived a whole year without food and water. But anyway, so they get down to the ground, and he sees his parents, and they notice that he's grown old, and his parents grew even older, and even the poor Condor got old. And oh, one little thing I forgot is the Condor knew this lake where if they bathe in it, they could be a lot younger looking. They get their youth restored to them. So the young man goes back to his parents, and he says to his parents, "I lost my bride. And because I'm so heartbroken, I will never look at another woman again." How many of you said that when you had a bad breakup? I'll never date another man again, or I'll never date another woman again. Nothing compares to Sinead O'Connor. But anyway, the parents try and take care of him and console him as best they can. But he dies heartbroken, never married, because he couldn't forget his Star Maiden. Anyway, these are my 3 stories for today. So I hope you enjoyed them, and I hope you're all doing well. And like I said, if you could think of other things you'd like me to tell, let me know. And until next time, Joey, the mythology dude, signing off.